the opportunity to introduce a new president of Brigham Young University on the day of his maiden speech to the students of the university is a rare privilege indeed that probably comes only once in a lifetime, or at least not oftener than once every 20 years. You've heard of the accomplishments. You've read of the accomplishments of President Oaks. They speak of a man of great dedication and drive, a man who was taught correct principles and then set his goals accordingly. As the days pass, we'll have opportunity to hear more of his accomplishments. Today, I would like to just share with you a glimpse of one or two things in his personal life. May I take you back to the town of Twin Falls in Idaho, where at the age of 7, Dallin Oaks came home one day and said to his mother, "Mother, the most wonderful thing has happened to me. I've fallen in love." And then he said, she's just beautiful. There's only one thing wrong with her. She's a daughter of the minister of the Christian church. But then with an optimism that is reflected even today, he said, "But I think that I can convert her." Glimpse number 2. Dallin Oaks is just twice as old, 14 years of age. And we look in on him riding a bus, all by himself, from Vernal to Denver, on his way to take a test for a first-class radio engineer's license. We can see him in the Federal Building in Denver, there in a room with everyone older than he, some men whose hair was gray, poring over the test and working at it. He completes the test. Inside has an assurance that the answer that he's come up with is right, that the figures are right, but not just exactly sure where the decimal should be. And so as we look at this young 14-year-old boy, we see him bow his head and ask the Lord for a special blessing to help him to make the right decision. Decision that he made and turned the paper in. He was told that within a week he would be advised as to whether or not he'd passed. And then to get on the bus and return to his home in Vernal, and there find a letter awaiting him, indicating that he had passed the test and that he was now a licensed first-class radio engineer. This experience opened up a job for him at the radio station in Vernal and later here in Provo, when the family moved to Provo. A job that he had with a local station here that he maintained all the time that he was in high school and all through college until he left to go to Chicago to law school. Glimpse number 3. In a second meeting, a 17-year-old boy by the name of Dallin Oaks has his name presented to be the assistant ward clerk, a position that he held, and among other things had the responsibility of preparing all of the receipts that related to the building of that chapel for the Provo 5th and 8th Ward. It still stands today. What do these 3 things tell us today? They tell of a man who from his very early years learned to have great love for people. They tell of a man who had a great desire to prepare himself, to develop excellence, to go first class, if you please, and to work, to learn that work is a great blessing of life. And above all, to learn that when you do the Lord's work, you get the Lord's pay. And that if you have the Lord as your partner, you cannot fail. This is the story of President Dallin H. And I hope that we can learn the lesson from it. Above all of the rest, President Dallin H is a family man. And we thought it particularly fitting this morning as we introduce him to introduce to you his family. And I'm going to ask them to stand as I tell you who they are. First of all, his lovely wife, June. Would you stand and still stay standing? And then his oldest daughter, Sharon. I didn't write it down. Sharma. I want to tell you she's old enough, young men who are here students at the university. And then Sherry, maybe we'll get it right this time. And then Lloyd. Lloyd received his name from President Oak's father, who is named Lloyd Oaks. Next we have Dallin D. And he came about his name because he was born on his father's birthday. And last but not least here in his immediate family is True Ann. Now, next is Dallin Oaks' mother, Sister Stella Oaks, who is an educator in her own right here in the Provo area. This is President Oaks' family. Yeah. And President Oaks, as we turn the time to you today, we'd like to say this to you. We love and appreciate your family. We'd like you to feel that we are part of your family now, that as you accept the leadership, that you would feel that we are your brothers and sisters, your sons and daughters. And just as your family has supported and sustained you, that we who are part of your larger family will support and sustain you here at Brigham Young University. President Dallin Oaks.
Thank you. Thank you, President Lewis, for your gracious introduction and for the expression of love, for introducing my family. I'm in your debt for that. My fellow students, 25,000 strong. This is my first opportunity to address the entire student body of Brigham Young University as your new president. In behalf of the Board of Trustees, the administration, the faculty, and the staff, I welcome you to Brigham Young University for the 1971-72 academic year. Approximately 6,200 of you are enrolled on this campus for the first time. Most of you will not have met the great man who was president of this university until August 1st, 1971. He led BYU through one of the most remarkable and successful periods of growth ever experienced by a university. Wherever you go on this campus, you will participate in his vision and enjoy the benefits of his leadership. He is with us on the stand, and I'm honored to introduce him to you, President Ernest L. Wilkinson. And I'm sure you all recognize that standing by his side is that gracious lady, Sister Wilkinson, and we're equally glad to have you with us, Sister Wilkinson. All who know and admire President Wilkinson will be able to appreciate the sense of humility and challenge that I feel at being selected to follow this great man. However, I'm sure all of you will recognize that I will do some things differently than President Wilkinson. For example, my financial condition will not permit me to start out for a salary of $1 a year. And my physical condition will not permit me to do 47 push-ups at basketball games. We're grateful for your presence here, President Wilkinson, and pleased that you will continue to work on this campus as you plan for the J. Reuben Clark College of Law. In the time that I stand before you, I will speak of standards and the nature of education at Brigham Young University. I will speak of standards of academics, conduct, and appearance expected of members of this community and some of our aspirations for the years ahead. Your qualifications and your decision to enroll have given you membership in a community of learning that is unique among the universities of the world. Brigham Young University is more than a university in the conventional sense. Its domain spans the limits of human experience. Spiritual as well as physical, practice as well as precept. Its approach to learning conforms to the scriptural direction to seek learning even by study and also by faith. Brigham Young University is concerned with teaching the fundamentals of spiritual and secular knowledge and with bringing those teachings into harmony in the lives of men and women in order to prepare them for a balanced and full life of service to God and fellow man. I stress at the outset our commitment to spiritual as well as secular knowledge, since our spiritual commitment is key to what is unique about this institution. It permeates all aspects of life at BYU. It is the motivating and directing force in shaping the high personal standards established for all members of this community. I also stress our concern with how people act, since what men do should be just as important to an educational institution as how much they know or how clearly they think. As John Ruskin, the 19th century English author and artist, declared, education does not mean teaching people what they do not know. It means teaching them to behave as they do not behave. It is not teaching youth the shapes of letters and the tricks of numbers and then leaving them to turn their arithmetic to roguery and their literature to lust. It means, on the contrary, training them into the perfect exercise and kindly continence of their bodies and souls. It is a painful, continual, and difficult work to be done by kindness, by watching, by warning, by precept, by praise, and above all, by example. President Joseph Fielding Smith recently gave forceful expression to the important relationship between spirituality and secular learning at this institution. Speaking at the 50th Annual Education Week program on this campus on June 8, 1971, he said, "There is also something unique about our system of education and training. We believe in intellectual pursuits and hope all our young people will gain that schooling which is best adapted to their individual talents and circumstances. But we believe in spiritual as well as intellectual education. The secular or worldly knowledge we gain will benefit us in our temporal pursuits, but the knowledge we gain of spiritual and eternal truths will prepare us to live everlastingly in the kingdom of our eternal Father. In the church school system, we gain both secular and eternal education." Continuing the quotation from President Smith, "Knowledge comes both by reason and by revelation. We are expected to study and learn all we can by research and analysis. But there are limits to our learning abilities in the realms of reason and study. The things of God can be known only by the Spirit of God. We must gain knowledge by faith. As the prophet wrote in Liberty Jail, God shall give unto you knowledge by his Holy Spirit, yea, by the unspeakable gift of the Holy Ghost." I urge you to make the most of your stay at BYU. Make this a time of great advance in intellect. Take up the challenge of learning. Stretch your mind with new ideas. Expand your vision. Raise your sights and aspirations. Make this a time of heightened appreciation for the creative arts. Learn to recognize what is virtuous, lovely, or of good report or praiseworthy. Cultivate your heaven-sent sensitivity to what is beautiful and seek after these things. Make this a time of appropriate attention to physical fitness. Proper food, rest, and exercise are just as essential to the sharpness of the mind as they are to the vigor of the body. Make this a time to form habits and to refine and strengthen standards of personal integrity and behavior. Many of you, especially those who are new students at this university, are on your own and away from daily parental guidance for the first time in your lives. I urge you to cultivate proper study habits, to use your time wisely, to become acquainted with the blessing of work, to form habits of thrift and proper financial planning. Be considerate of those around you. Keep your places of living neat and clean. Avoid contention and bitterness on any subject. And establish for now and for all time a standard of absolute honesty and integrity in all aspects of your personal life and your dealings with others. Make this a time of increasing spirituality, at a time when you should be having great growth in secular knowledge and understanding. Strive for similar growth in spiritual education and experience. The spirit can be starved as well as the body. Spiritual muscles will also shrivel from neglect and disuse. Most of you have come from faithful Latter-day Saint homes where spiritual and intellectual life have an honored place in the scale of life's values. Many of these homes are of humble circumstance, where parents are making real sacrifices to assure your education. Uphold the standards of these homes and make your parents proud of your accomplishments and content with their sacrifices. Make the most of your own sacrifices, for thousands of you are working to earn money for your own education. Strive for harmonious growth of body, mind, and spirit. Know this, that the Creator who gave us body, mind, and spirit intended that all should be cultivated. If we neglect one, we weaken all. Participate in the activities and put forth the effort to make your stay at Brigham Young University a time of intellectual growth, artistic sensitivity, physical vigor, exemplary personal behavior, and spiritual progress. What I have said is quite general. I will be more specific about one vital aspect of life at BYU, church attendance. President Wilkinson has called the establishment of the student wards and stakes the most important single accomplishment of his 20-year administration. I concur in the enormous importance of the church organizations on this campus and expect to see further increases in their influence and effectiveness. I have been asked whether church attendance is a requirement for continued enrollment at Brigham Young University. The answer is yes and no. The administration of this university has no desire to use the coercive pressure of academic standing or continued enrollment as a club to force church attendance or activity. Our spiritual and religious lives are too precious and personal, too much a function of free choice to be carried out under a regime of compulsion. Their purpose is the growth of the individual, and compulsion is at odds with growth, especially in the realm of the spirit. At the same time, religious activities in the BYU wards and stakes are an integral part of life on this campus. They are vital to what is unique about this university. There are thousands of young Latter-day Saint men and women who are qualified to study here and who have been denied admission because there is no room for them within our limitation of 25,000 students. Among the principal reasons why these young people desire to study here are the opportunities for spiritual growth that are enjoyed on this campus and have their principal focus in the student wards. The Latter-day Saint student who takes no part in the religious life on this campus is occupying a place in the student body that excludes another young Latter-day Saint who is anxious to be admitted and to participate in the entire range of campus activities. This is unfair and an unwise use of the unique resources of this institution. A student ought not to be forced to study either. Compulsory study hall or library attendance would be inconsistent with the best principles of learning and free choice. But a person who has no desire to use the academic facilities of this university, and in fact does not use them regularly, should not be here. He should step aside in favor of those who would use them. The problem of how we are to limit our student body to those who will actively participate in our unique religious life, and at the same time how we are to avoid offending the important principle of free choice in church attendance, is a classic example of principles that are at least partially in conflict. This is a matter on which we will prayerfully continue to seek a resolution that will serve both principles insofar as possible. I mention the matter here since it is well for all members of this community to know the value we attach to church activity and to free choice. What I have said about attendance at the campus wards, of course, does not apply to the 800 students who are not members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Non-members, we welcome you. Your presence here will enrich the education of all of us. In a world where members of our church are in a minority, we need special concern and appreciation for the minority among us. We pledge that you will be free from discrimination, that you will suffer no disadvantage in any program or activity of the university because you are not a member of our church. Of course, this does not mean that you are excused from adherence to any standard of the university, including those that require lives in conformity with the high moral standards of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Except for church attendance and activity, we expect the same high standards of conduct and appearance from member and non-member alike. We invite you to take part in the religious activities on this campus. If you do not, we encourage you to seek out a religious affiliation and associations of your choice. We urge you not to neglect worship and other spiritual activity and study during your stay here. We also seek your understanding of the fact that we are a proselyting faith. It would be strange if non-members on this campus did not feel the hand of fellowship and receive numerous invitations to learn more of our church by study, attendance, and participation. We hope those efforts are not compulsive and those invitations are in good taste. We proselyte because we have something of unique value that we desire to share with everyone. We want you and your families to be shown through our efforts how Latter-day Saints live and work and study. If some of you choose to become members of our church, as many have previously done in the course of their education here, we will feel grateful that our efforts to share this joy with you have been rewarded. The most important thing about every member of this community is that he or she is a son or daughter of God. The importance of that fact transcends all other considerations of status, such as faculty, student, or staff. And it transcends all matters of religious affiliation, race, or national origin. Let us remember this in all of our dealings with one another. If there is any one desire that I would place above all others for this university, it is that all members of this community, in all of their dealings with one another and with all mankind, would set an example of Christian living for the entire world to see. The atmosphere or spirit of learning that this university desires to maintain is a fragile thing. Like the Spirit of the Lord, it is banished by disruption and discord. We must all work together in love and cooperation to maintain that atmosphere where our learning and living can go forward, where we can enjoy the constant companionship of the Spirit of the Lord. To preserve that atmosphere and that spirit, disruptive demonstrations and concerted activities of a coercive nature are not tolerated on this campus. Our tradition is a blend of the reason appropriate to a university and the persuasion, long-suffering, gentleness, and love appropriate to the church and gospel of Jesus Christ. While we are being considerate of one another, it is also important that we be considerate of our environment. When 30,000 people come into daily contact in the close quarters of a campus, the problems of cleanliness and wear and tear are enormous. I call upon each member of this community to preserve and build up, not to tear down. For example, the slogan coined last spring, "Keep your bod off the sod," is more than a catchy phrase. It is a necessity. If each of the 30,000 persons on this campus cut across a patch of lawn just once each day, our lovely lawns would soon be crisscrossed with ugly paths. This request does not preclude lounging on the lawns, and we hope our lawns will be enjoyed in that way. But if we are to keep our lawns attractive and inviting for that purpose, we must not let them become a network of unsightly, muddy, or dusty trails. The same concern for our environment dictates considerate handling of litter, of library books and other common study materials, and care in the use of university property generally. Help us keep this campus a place of beauty and utility for all. And now a word to the men, especially to entering students. The imminent official renewal of the draft makes it imperative that you consider the very real possibility that you will be called into military service. Now is the time to plan how you can give the best service to your country and at the same time arrange your service at a time and in a manner most favorable to your own career plans. This is especially important if you are planning for a mission. In this connection, I urge you to consider the important advantages of the Army or Air Force ROTC programs which have an honored place on this campus. Copies of my brief message on this subject will be available as you exit from this assembly. Further information should be obtained from the ROTC building, which is located across the parking lot east of the Wilkinson Center. I've received many inquiries during the past few months about whether the standards of Brigham Young University would be maintained. The answer is yes. There are three major areas in which we have high standards for all members of the university community: academic, conduct, and appearance. As for academic standards, I need do no more than emphasize that this is a university. Every student who is admitted here has the capacity, with proper application and efforts, of doing at least passing work. Those who do not invest the effort necessary to succeed at their studies should step aside and allow their places to be filled by others who are anxious to study here. I encourage you to strive for excellence in your studies. Learn precision in thought and expression. Develop your awareness and deepen your understanding of the world in which we live. Budget your time so as not to neglect your studies. Cultivate balance so that you can benefit from all that is available at this university. But remember that this is a university and you are here to gain an education. Do not use other activities, valuable or otherwise, as an excuse to neglect your studies. The standards of conduct that govern all members of this university community are embodied in the Code of Student Conduct. Each person admitted to this university has signified on the admissions application his or her agreement to abide by the principles of that code. You are all therefore committed, and here I quote from the Code of Student Conduct, to live the high moral standards of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, including observance of the law of chastity, to refrain from the use of tea, coffee, alcoholic beverages, or tobacco in any form, and to avoid all use, possession, distribution of narcotics or other dangerous drugs except as prescribed by a physician. The Code also forbids dishonesty, cheating, plagiarism, obstruction or disruption of any university activities, vandalism, theft, and damage to the property of others. In connection with theft, I take this occasion to remind the tiny group who need reminding that stealing is a crime and will be treated as a crime, whether it occurs on this campus or on the premises of the downtown merchants. Students who would like to have another copy or who have any questions about the interpretation of any item of this code should contact the Dean of Students' office. Related to the standards of conduct are the standards that govern performances on this campus. Over the summer, we've had to endure a great deal of nonsensical criticism of BYU for choosing not to show a particular film on this campus because it did not meet our standards. One of the most popular arguments has asserted that a university must be open and therefore must welcome anything to the campus in order that its students and faculty be exposed to a cross-section of reality. This is a foolish suggestion, and one that is not followed on even the most libertine campuses in our country. Consider for a moment what would happen to our environment if reality were the only test of what was welcomed here. The picture of reality includes all manner of profanity, crudity, immorality, pornography, violence, and depravity. Persons who desire to partake of that segment of reality, and I hope their numbers include none from BYU, will have to seek it elsewhere. This university is a home for ideas, for growth, for expansion of intellectual horizons, and for challenge to the mind, the body, and the spirit. But we will not welcome onto this campus any more than thoughtful Latter-day Saint parents will welcome into their homes the blasphemous, the sordid, the crude, or the vulgar. Those characterizations are not self-defining, and there may be differences from time to time in the application of the principle, but the principle itself is clear. we will continue to be selective about what we tolerate on this campus and even more selective about what we sponsor. Because of great concern and agitation about the standards of appearance specified for this campus, I will speak at some length on this subject. I hope that full treatment at this point will contribute to the kind of increased understanding and wholehearted acceptance that will enable all of us to speak of this subject less frequently in the future. About a month ago, I mailed a copy of the revised standards of dress and grooming to the parents of all new and returning students. A copy was also printed in the summer issue of the Universe that was mailed to all students. Consequently, even the new students should be familiar with these standards. But even a casual observer of the campus scene must conclude that many students have not taken them seriously. Many girls are wearing skirts that are entirely too short for the standard of modesty, and some young men are wearing hairstyles that show no regard for the requirements that hair be trimmed so as not to cover the ears or be over the collar in the back, and that long or bushy sideburns are not acceptable. A few young men and women are wearing clothing that is deliberately untidy, disordered, frayed, carelessly torn, or in other ways inconsistent with the general requirement that attire and grooming should always be neat and clean. I will address myself to the reasons for these requirements. Because concern seems to focus on short skirts for women and beards and long hair for men, I will use these as examples. I sense a certain aloofness about these matters. Many who are among the offenders think the message is only for the other person. I hope that each member of the university community will listen carefully to what I have to say and consider how my words apply directly to him or her. What I have to say is, of course, addressed only to faculty, staff, and students of Brigham Young University. I have no authority or desire to be heard on this subject as it relates to the youth of the church generally or to students at institutions other than the church education system. I've known some fine young Latter-day Saints who have chosen manners of dress and grooming that are not consistent with the standards that apply on this campus. So long as they do not plan to become students in the church education system, their manner of dress and grooming is a subject between them and their parents to be resolved with thoughtful and prayerful consideration of the council of our church leaders. The first and most important thing to remember about our standards of dress and grooming is that they are specified by the Board of Trustees. They are not the requirements of the president, the dean of students, the faculty, or the student body officers. These standards of dress and grooming were reviewed and reapproved as recently as last April. At that time, the trustees provided the following statement, which is expressive of the reasons for these rules. Quote, "Grooming should be in keeping with these guidelines, emphasizing cleanliness and avoidance of dress or manner which calls attention to itself and symbolizes either rebellion or nonconformity with the values of modesty, humility, decency, and propriety." I think all will agree that dress and grooming standards are not the most important standards required of those who attend this university, but they are among the very most visible as we associate with one another and as we come under the eyes of those who visit this campus. Consequently, these matters have been emphasized and will be emphasized to an extent beyond their intrinsic importance. Those who take exception to this emphasis should remember that while most of these standards are not vital matters of personal morality, neither are they burdensome. Like the word of wisdom, the requirements are adapted to the capacity of the weak and the weakest of all saints who are or can be called saints. Speaking of short skirts on the one hand and long hair and beards on the other, we should note that the reasons for these requirements are different. Skirt lengths for women are a function of modesty. The ban on long hair and beards, on the other hand, is a question of symbolism and propriety. Let us examine these separately. First, as to skirt lengths. After the trustees reviewed the standards of dress and grooming last spring, they made only two minor changes, both relating to women's clothing. They added culottes, slacks, or modest pantsuits, not to include Levi's, to the acceptable women's wear for attendance at classes, and they specified modest length as the standard for women's hemlines. The inclusion of pantsuits authorizes a style of dress that is clearly modest, however unfeminine some may think it to be. Standing by itself, the word slacks refers to a wide spectrum of attire covering the extremes between the dressy component of the pantsuit on the one hand on down to the grubbiest trousers only suitable to slop the pigs. The authorization of slacks for general wear on this campus was meant to signify the kind of slacks that are as dressy as one portion of the pantsuit. This new addition to the dress standards does not authorize the wearing of jeans, men's trousers, or other slacks from the grubby end of the spectrum. Nor should it be understood to authorize the wearing of t-shirts, sweatshirts, or other similar attire. These two modifications must not be the occasion for a general deterioration of women's dress standards on this campus. The subject of skirt lengths is such a vexing one that I hesitate to mention it, but I must do so. The standard is modesty. Quote, "Modesty in dress is a quality of mind and heart born of respect for oneself, one's fellow man, and the Creator of us all. Modesty reflects an attitude of humility, decency, and propriety." That's from the Priesthood Bulletin of September 1970. Now, you will observe that this definition of modesty does not refer to what the girls are wearing in high school or at colleges and universities generally. It makes no reference to what the czars of fashion dictate or to what you see in the glamour magazines. At Brigham Young University, we have a style of our own. Those words, "a style of our own," were the title of an address given on this campus on February 13, 1951, the year I was a freshman here, by Elder Spencer W. Kimball, now acting president of the Council of the 12. In that address, Elder Kimball referred to immodesty as a contributing factor in the breakdown of moral values. "I know I'm not going to be popular when I say this," he told us, "but I am sure that the immodest dresses that are worn by our young women and their mothers contribute in some degree to the immorality of this age. I wonder if our young sisters realize the temptation they are flaunting before young men when they leave their bodies partly uncovered." End of quote. I can vividly recall the furor that followed his criticism of strapless evening gowns on this campus. But I note that low-cut necklines and strapless evening gowns are still forbidden by our standards. And all that Elder Kimball said in criticism of excessive exposure and in support of modesty applies with equal force to short skirts. Young women, the principle of modesty, the commandment that you should avoid a tempting manner or appearance, is fixed and eternal and will not deviate. Don't assume that anyone will be impressed with your experience or your preference or your wisdom on this subject. With respect to lengths of skirts, there is a point which need not and probably cannot be defined in inches above the knee, where the wearer is calling attention to herself, exposing too much of her body, and sending off signals and inviting responses that are not consistent with the standards of the gospel. Girls, especially those of you who have not previously studied on this campus, please examine your skirt lengths carefully. Where you have any doubts, seek the advice of more experienced persons who are familiar with and supportive of the standards of this campus. Wear a skirt length that will appear modest and proper at all times, not just when you look down on it as you stand before the mirror in the morning, but also a length that will appear modest when you are climbing stairs, stooping, bending, sitting, and walking across stages. As to the reason for modesty in general and skirt lengths in particular, I cannot do better than to quote President Joseph Fielding Smith. "As I walk along the streets on my way to or from the church office building, I see both young and older women, many of them daughters of Zion, who are immodestly dressed. The wearing of immodest clothing, which may seem like a small matter, takes something away from our young women or young men in the church. It simply makes it more difficult to keep those eternal principles by which we must live if we are to return to the presence of our Father in heaven." The rule against beards and long hair for men stands on a different footing. I'm weary of having young people tell me how most of our church leaders in earlier times wore beards and long hair, which shows that these are not inherently evil. Others argue that beards cannot be evil because they see bearded men enjoying the privileges of the temple. To me, this privilege seems so obvious that it is hardly worth mentioning. Unlike modesty, which is an eternal value in the sense of rightness or wrongness in the eyes of God, our rules against beards and long hair are contemporary and pragmatic. They are responsive to conditions and attitudes in our own society at this particular point in time. Historical precedents are worthless in this area. The rules are subject to change, and I would be surprised if they were not changed at some time in the future. But the rules are with us now, and it is therefore important that we understand the reasons behind them. There is nothing inherently wrong about long hair or beards any more than there is anything inherently wrong with possessing an empty liquor bottle. But a person with a beard or an empty liquor bottle is susceptible of being misunderstood. Either of these articles may reduce a person's effectiveness and promote misunderstanding because of what people may reasonably conclude when they view them in proximity to what these articles stand for in our society. In the minds of most people at this time, the beard and long hair are associated with protest, revolution, and rebellion against authority. They are symbols of the hippie and drug culture. Persons who wear beards or long hair, whether they desire it or not, may identify themselves with or emulate and honor the drug culture or the extreme practices of those who have made slovenly appearance a badge of protest and dissent. In addition, unkemptness, which is often, though not always, associated with beards and long hair, is a mark of indifference toward the best in life. Elder Sterling W. Sill has observed that a letdown in personal appearance has far more than physical significance, for when ugliness gets its root into one part of our lives, it may soon spread to cover every other part. A young bishop of my acquaintance can testify to the impact of unkempt appearance on those around us and its relationship to the drug culture. One evening last June, Bishop E. Wayne Nelson of the South Shore Ward in Griffith, Indiana, received a telephone call from a jailer in an Indiana city 50 miles from his home. The jailer was holding 2 Mormon boys who were charged with possession of narcotics. Bishop Nelson made several visits to these young men as they waited in jail for their cases to be heard. He learned that both were from Utah, the sons of active Latter-day Saint parents. Both had tampered with drugs in this state. Both had adopted an unkempt appearance, including shoulder-length hair. Soon after they arrived in Gary, Indiana to look for work, and while they were walking down a street, a peddler of narcotics approached them and invited them to make a purchase. Faced with that temptation at that time in that place, the boys chose not to resist. Soon after this transaction, they were arrested and charged with possession of the drugs they had purchased. After the bishop heard their story in jail, he asked them, "Why do you think the peddler approached you?" One boy responded, "I guess it was our appearance. We just looked like users." These young men had taken upon themselves the badges of the drug culture, and they were easily identified and approached by those who sought to profit from their weakness. By the manner of our dress and personal grooming, we send off signals to the world around us. Our appearance identifies us with certain manners of behavior and creates expectations in those around us. Our appearance and their expectations may influence our own behavior. The standards of dress and grooming prescribed for this campus and for the entire church education system seek to identify us with high standards of personal conduct and to disassociate us from the currently popular symbols of immorality, drugs, and dissent. We should be identified with the manner of dress of persons whom we respect. I appeal to all students on this campus to place themselves squarely within our standards of appearance, not on the thin ice at the edge of the standard, but squarely within. I appeal especially to those of you who are leaders in any capacity, in student government, in student organizations, or in campus wards. Be supportive and exemplary in accepting and living these standards. Set the proper example. Use your influence to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Now, I regret having to devote so much time to this subject. I do so under the compulsion of necessity. I'm conscious that you can't make a great university by lowering hemlines and by shaving chins. I have no desire to make the razor and the tape measure symbols of my administration. Along with the overwhelming majority of students and faculty at this institution, I want us to be about the business of learning. Let us observe these standards of appearance, not neglecting the weightier matters that bring us here. Before leaving this subject, however, I need to address myself to any person who cannot accept this reasoning and who cannot observe our standards of dress and grooming. If you intend to ignore or subvert these rules or use them as an occasion for protest, please go somewhere else. This is a university seriously concerned about the pursuit of education. We do not desire to engage in jousting matches with anyone. If you choose to ignore the rules you have agreed to observe, demonstrate the sincerity of your protest by going somewhere else. Let us part peacefully and without injury to one another. Sample the environment at some other institution. If you find it to your liking, carry on your studies there. If not, we invite you to return and participate with us here on the same basis as others. Some may complain that our standards of conduct and appearance make Brigham Young University a controlled environment. That is true. Since we are an institution that promotes learning by study and also by faith, it should not be surprising that we are concerned to exclude some forces and influences of the world. A worshiping assembly that desires to enjoy the influence of the Spirit of the Lord does not meet on a busy thoroughfare after the manner of the world. Our standards are responsive to our mission and to our approach to learning. Our standards are also long-standing. This is evident from the following words spoken on this campus 92 years ago by a 17-year-old youth by the name of James E. Talmage, who had just been appointed an instructor at this institution. Quote, "As students know, all of our conduct in this academy, of teachers as well as students, all our discipline, all our studies, are conducted according to the Spirit of the living God. If a student endeavors to be guided by that same Spirit, the rules and regulations instituted here become part of his nature. He will not be able to see how it could possibly be otherwise. His spirit fits and accommodates itself to the rules, and the rules accommodate themselves to his spirit. We can well afford," he said, "to lose any number of students who would not conform to our rules, but we cannot afford to lose that spirit." End of quote. Now, I realize that I'm running over time. I'm going to take the liberty of doing so, if I may have the indulgence of each of you and of the faculty. In the interests of our guests, and in order to promote the spirit of friendliness and hospitality for which this campus is justly famous, I will say one more word about our standards as they apply to guests. Some of our standards apply to guests as well as to permanent members of the community. For example, considerations of clean air, environment, and decorum prompt us to request that our visitors not use alcohol or tobacco on our campus. But other standards need not be required of the occasional visitor. It would be both arrogant and presumptuous of us to require the occasional visitor who prefers to wear a beard or long hair to cut them off before venturing on our campus. Refraining from smoking is a temporary inconvenience for the user, but cutting off a beard or trimming long locks is a semi-permanent impairment. We intend to be firm in our standards, but let us also be hospitable and understanding of those who are not bound by the requirements of this community. I come now to two subjects that are often raised when Brigham Young University is the topic of discussion: the degree to which BYU insulates its students from the so-called real world, and the wisdom of keeping Brigham Young University different from other universities. The world is all about us. You students come from every state in the Union and from more than 60 foreign countries. Almost a third of you have had 2 years missionary service, living among the peoples of this and foreign lands. Our faculty has been educated in almost every major university in the country and in many other great universities of the world. Of course, all of us can benefit from further broadening of our experience, but the remarkable variety of living experiences represented on this cosmopolitan campus does suggest that most of us have had ample opportunity to be exposed to the world and its problems. We hold that for some educational purposes, distance is just as important as exposure. Every person, and especially students who are in the process of establishing their personal code of values, should be able to shut out the pressure to back away and view the world from a little distance. A period of insulation should assist the student in resolving how he will seek to influence the world and the extent to which he is willing to be influenced by it. This fixing of direction for life is a core purpose of a university, whether it be BYU or any other. And here you have the detachment to aid you in that important task. Now, as to the value of being different, although there's no inherent virtue in difference as such, it would be a major tragedy in higher education if students could not choose from a variety of institutions with major differences to fit their individual needs and preferences. Every university has standards, and rightly so, but I doubt the wisdom of making any single set of standards standard throughout the universities of our land. Basic requirements of academic excellence must obviously be part of any accredited university, but within those requirements there must be an opportunity for pluralism and experimentation. If not, the community of universities will become no more than a conglomerate information factory, largely sterile in its efforts to direct the mind into uncharted areas of knowledge and experience. If we are indeed wise, as the poet-philosopher Khalil Gibran has said, we will not simply bid the student to enter the house of our wisdom, but will rather lead him to the threshold of his own mind. And this aspiration demands a deep understanding of the importance of diversity in the philosophies and practices of different universities. At BYU, we make a unique contribution to that diversity. Thus far, my remarks have concentrated on the unique characteristics of this university. Although we cherish that diversity, we must also acknowledge our membership in the family of higher education. The things that unite us with our sister institutions are surely more numerous, though not more important, than those that set us apart. We are proud of the universities and colleges in this state, which is blessed with so many fine facilities for higher education. We extend our goodwill to the University of Utah, to Utah State, to Weber State, and to the host of smaller institutions, especially to our Provo neighbor, the Utah Technical College. We join with each of them in concern for the financial difficulties of all of higher education. We sorrow in the discord and political controversy that sometimes seems to threaten to impair the functions of educational institutions. Education is an enterprise in which each of us is interested. What strengthens higher education strengthens us. What weakens some institutions may weaken all. Competition among institutions is inevitable, but it is also incidental. I hope we will reserve our blocking and kicking for the football field and our one-upmanship for the athletic scoreboards. The spirit of our relationships, especially in this state but throughout the nation, should be harmony, cooperation, and mutual respect. Now, a university is a place of learning. It honors and shelters all who are willing to sacrifice in the search for truth. Education is not an easy enterprise. It is profoundly unsettling. What President Harold B. Lee said of the church can also be said of the university. Its purpose is to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comforted. I quote him further. There are those who are too comforted and too much at ease and too unresponsive to their responsibilities and opportunities. Some persons need to share with others their material blessings of the earth. Some persons are too comforted and too much at ease in their lifestyle, and they need to become dissatisfied enough to change for the better. There are those who are too much at ease in their prejudices and ideas. They need to humble themselves before the spirit of brotherhood and the principles of the gospel. Advances in understanding, increases in maturity, growth, are not smooth processes. We need to be dissatisfied in order to be receptive to learning. A consciousness of our own inadequacies, humility, is a necessary precondition for learning. We have much to learn as individuals and as an institution, and many miles to go before we sleep. But our course is charted and our destiny is fixed. The First Presidency has declared that because of the unique combination of revealed and secular learning, Brigham Young University is destined to become the most proficient institution of learning in the world. You and I are privileged to work toward that destiny. But if that destiny is to become an acknowledged reality, we must each give of ourselves and give our best for the perfection of this great institution and for the welfare of all who support its aspirations and accomplishments. Let us go forward in that cause and work in that destiny, is my prayer, which I bear to you, assuring you of the testimony of the truthfulness of the gospel that I have in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.